A single rule exists at Canyon Serenity that will get you killed if you break it. This isn't some dramatic exaggeration or a line from a park brochure designed to thrill tourists. This is the absolute, unvarnished truth, learned through the most harrowing night of my life. Before I tell you why I no longer work as a ranger, you need to understand something vital about this place. Most visitors don't know that Canyon Serenity National Monument operates under a different reality. It's not a place you visit, conquer, or claim. Every canyon wall, every grain of sand, every silent artifact sleeping in the sun belongs to the Tse Nation. What I'm going to share is a secret most will never learn, a boundary most will never cross, and a teacher most will never meet. If you want stories from places that hold deep mysteries, where the map ends and the real world begins, subscribe to Winds of Thought. Please share this. If you've ever stood somewhere and felt the hair on your neck rise, if you've encountered something you couldn't file away with logic, tell me in the comments. Let me know I'm not the only one who's been forever marked by an event that defies explanation. My name is Eli Vance. I'm 41 years old. 2 days after the events I'm about to describe, I resigned from my post, handed in my badge, and walked away from a career I loved. I was good at my job, certified in wilderness medicine, trained in advanced search and rescue. I believe my qualifications and my commitment made me ready for anything this canyon could throw at me. I was catastrophically, dangerously wrong. The most critical, non-negotiable fact about Canyon Serenity is this: you cannot wander freely. Forget your experiences at Yosemite or Yellowstone. Here, you need a Tse guide for nearly every step you take beyond the visitor center. Only one trail, the Sun Temple Path, allows for unaccompanied travel, and even that is a concession, a bone thrown to the concept of public access. For everything else, every side canyon, every ancient dwelling, every seep spring, a guide isn't a strong suggestion or a wise precaution. It is tribal law, codified and sovereign, and on this reservation land, it overrules every federal regulation I was sworn to uphold. My first month was a constant friction between my Park Service protocols and this ancient, living jurisdiction. My liaison officer was an elder named Samuel Kaya. He was in his 70s, Tse-born, with a face carved by decades of canyon sun and wind. He'd been with the Park Service for longer than I've been alive, a bridge between two worlds. Because of my youth and my evident confidence, he treated me with a patient, observational distance for the first few months. "Stop acting like you're in charge, Lai," he told me quietly but firmly during my second week, after I directed a maintenance crew without consulting him. "The canyon is in charge. The Tse are in charge. You are a guest here, and guests mind their manners." I nodded, offered a conciliatory smile, but internally I dismissed it as territorial posturing. I didn't grasp the profound truth in his warning. Not then. I still saw my uniform as the ultimate authority. The real story, the one that unmade me, began on a crisp October day, the 25th, in 2025. A tourist named Carl Jensen, 48, from Phoenix, had gone into the Tse-led backcountry 3 days prior. His itinerary was standard: photography, camping, guided cultural interpretation. He was due back at the trailhead at dusk. He never arrived. His guide, a quiet, competent man named Leo, came to the station alone just after nightfall. Leo's report was precise and troubling. Carl had wanted to stay longer at a viewpoint to capture the golden hour light on the canyon walls. Leo, not wanting to create conflict with client, reluctantly agreed. He established a camp a quarter-mile away, planning to retrieve Carl before full dark. When he returned, the viewpoint was empty, not just of Carl, but of all his gear, his pack, his tripod. Everything vanished. But Leo noticed a single anomaly. By the base of formation called Sentinel Spire, Carl's high-end camera sat perfectly upright on a flat stone. Its battery was completely drained. Leo immediately searched the immediate area, calling Carl's name until his voice grew hoarse. Finding nothing, he ran the several miles back to the trailhead to report. A man was missing in a landscape that swallows people whole. My training snapped into gear. I began organizing a dawn search party, calling in rangers from adjacent sectors, plotting grid patterns. Time was the enemy. That's when Samuel found me. He took my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and pulled me into the quiet of the supply room. "We search tomorrow afternoon," he stated, his voice leaving no room for debate. I reacted with pure, unfiltered frustration. "Afternoon? Samuel, afternoon is too late. Dawn is standard procedure. Every hour we wait drastically reduces his chances. You know the statistics as well as I do." He simply crossed his arms, his expression a mask of unreadable patience. "It is near Weaver Rock," he said, as if that explained everything. "Weaver Rock? What does that have to do with anything? Have you heard the legend of Weaver Rock?" I had. Of course I had. It was a monument's iconic feature, a towering 800-foot sandstone spire. Tourists loved to photograph it. The Tse call it Tse Ninadli, Spider Rock. In their stories, Spider Grandmother lives atop it. She is a cultural hero, the one who taught their people to weave, to create beauty from utility. She is sacred, a teacher, a grandmother. Samuel paused, and the air in the small room grew heavy. But she is also a protector, a guardian, and she does not tolerate disrespect. I worked hard to keep all skepticism from my voice. "Okay, I respect the stories. What does that have to do with Carl Jensen?" "Yesterday," Samuel said slowly, "Carl climbed Weaver Rock. Leo tried to stop him. Carl made it about 50 feet up before Leo could convince him to come down." Samuel tapped a finger on the map spread between us, right on the spire symbol. "That is disrespect. Profound disrespect of sacred ground. And now he is missing." A cold knot formed in my stomach. "You think Spider Grandmother took him?" I couldn't believe the words were leaving my mouth in a professional context. Samuel's eyes held mine. "I think the canyon claims those who show it no respect. And I think searching Weaver Rock at night, especially after such an act, is a very good way to join him." His face held not a hint of humor, not a trace of metaphorical speaking. He was stating a fact as plain as the sunrise. I wanted to torn him with search and rescue statistics about the golden hour, about hypothermia curves, about survival percentages that plummet with every passing minute. But Samuel was my liaison, my essential guide to navigating Tse protocols. Ignoring him wouldn't just be rude. It would torch my working relationship with the tribe and make my job impossible. I took a breath, forcing calm. "Fine. First light tomorrow. Not afternoon. We'll be respectful. We'll do whatever you say is needed, but we're not waiting until the sun is high." Samuel studied me for a long, silent moment. "Do not go alone, Eli, and do not go after dark. The canyon is different at night, especially near Weaver Rock. It is not the same place." He left me standing there, the map suddenly looking less like a guide and more like a puzzle with a missing, terrifying piece. I finished the plan. Myself, 2 other rangers, and Leo as our guide. We grid searched from Carl's last known location. I worked at my desk until midnight, finalizing routes, checking equipment manifests. Then I drove the short distance to my government housing, a small, lonely trailer perched on the canyon's rim. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. Part of it was a standard pre-search anxiety, the mental ticking clock. But a larger part was something else, a deep, primal unease Samuel had planted. Through my small window, I could see the canyon silhouette against a blanket of cold stars, an immense and ancient blackness. And somewhere in that vast, sleeping darkness, Carl Jensen was either injured, lost, or dead. Every hour I spent in my warm bed felt like a personal and professional failure. At 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. The decision was logical, efficient. I would go down alone. A quick, quiet reconnaissance. I'd hike to Weaver Rock, sweep the immediate area with my headlamp, mark any findings, and be back at my trailer well before dawn. If I found Carl or clear evidence of his location, we could launch the official search at first light with precision. If I found nothing, I'd be back before anyone knew I'd left, with no harm done. It was proactive. It was, to my mind, what any truly dedicated ranger would do. I consciously pushed Samuel's warning into a dark corner of my mind. It was superstition, the respectful folklore of an ancient culture, but not an operational reality. I was a man of science, of protocol, of tangible threats. I geared up in the silent darkness, headlamp with fresh batteries, 2 liters of water, park radio, a compact first aid kit, energy bars. I left a note on my desk detailing my route and my expected return time of 5:30 a.m., a responsible precaution. Then I drove my truck to the empty Sun Temple trailhead, the engine sounding obscenely loud in profound silence. The trail dropped 600 feet into the canyon's mouth via a series of tight switchbacks. In daylight, it's a stunning hike, offering views of 1,000-year-old dwellings built into the cliffs. At 2:30 a.m., with only the narrow cone of my headlamp for company, it was a descent into a different world. Just rocks, shadows, and the relentless, gritty scrape of my boots on sandstone. The world shrunk to the next step, the next turn. I reached the canyon floor at 3 a.m. The temperature had plunged, my breath fog in the lamplight. I pulled out my GPS and marked the waypoint. Weaver Rock was approximately 2 miles to the southeast, following a rough, sandy wash. In daylight with a group, it was a 3-hour round trip. At night, alone, I budgeted 90 minutes each way. I started walking. The silence was not peaceful. It was absolute and oppressive. No wind sighed through the cottonwoods. No insects chirped. Just the crunch of my footsteps and the occasional skitter of a dislodged pebble echoing between the walls. My headlamp beam cut a frail tunnel through the darkness, illuminating flashes of red sandstone streaked with black desert varnish, the skeletal branches of dead juniper, and occasionally the ghostly shapes of petroglyphs, spirals and bighorn sheep carved by hand centuries gone. About a mile in, the feeling began. It started as a prickle at the base of my skull, the classic sensation of being watched. I'd felt it dozens of times in remote areas. It's your hindbrain, evolved to detect predators, throwing false positives at every shadow. You learn to acknowledge it and move on. But this was different. This felt focused, intentional, not a passive wilderness awareness, but an active tracking, a presence matching my pace, staying deliberately just outside the edge of my light, in the perfect blind spot. I stopped dead, my heart hammering against my ribs. I slowly swept my headlamp beam in a full 360-degree circle. Nothing, just the immense, stationary walls of the canyon, drinking the light. You're imagining things, I muttered aloud, the sound of my own voice both reassuring and pathetic. It's the dark. It's the stress. Keep moving. I kept walking, but the feeling didn't leave. It intensified. At 4:15 a.m., I rounded a final bend in the wash, and there it was, Weaver Rock. Even swallowed by night, it was awe-inspiring. An 800-foot spear of sandstone erupting from the canyon floor, a solitary monument against a star-flecked sky. The upper third was a distinct, pale white from mineral leaching. In the Tse story Samuel had alluded to, that whiteness is said to be the bleached bones of children who misbehaved, taken by Spider Grandmother, a chilling campfire tale. But standing at its base in the absolute dead of night, the bone-white summit glowing faintly in the starlight. The legend ceased to be a story. It felt like a statement of fact. The place had a physical, palpable gravity. It felt occupied, swallowing hard. I began a methodical circle of the base, looking for any sign of Carl. The camera was there exactly as Leo described, a modern, expensive piece of equipment, sitting absurdly upright on a flat altar-like stone. I picked it up. The power was dead, the screen black. I bagged it as evidence. Then I saw the tracks. Clear, fresh boot prints in the sandy soil. They approached the spire from the wash, walked directly to its base and stopped. There were no tracks leading away. No scuffles, no signs of a fall. It was as if Carl Jensen had walked up to the monolithic stone and simply ceased to exist. A cold deeper than the night air seeped into my bones. I keyed my radio. "Base! This is Vance at Weaver Rock. Do you copy?" Only static hissed back. The canyon walls were notorious signal blockers. I'd have to climb back. That's when I heard it, to report. Singing. Faint, ethereal, coming from high above me, not from the canyon rim, but from the spire itself. A woman's voice, singing in a language I didn't recognize. Not English, not Spanish. It was fluid, ancient, a melody that seemed woven into the very air. Fear, sharp and clean, shot through me. "Hello?" I called up, my voice cracking. "Park Service. Is someone up there?" The singing stopped instantly. The following silence was thicker, heavier than before. And in that silence, I heard a new sound. Clicking. A dry, rapid tick-tick-tick-tick, like enormous fingernails on rock, but amplified, coming from multiple points. And it was moving, fast, descending the sheer face of the spire, coming straight down toward me. I stumbled back, my headlamp beam jerking wildly up the rock face. For a terrifying second, I saw nothing but unbroken stone. Then, about 100 feet up, I caught the movement. Long, segmented limbs, too many joints, moving with a fluid, arachnid grace that was utterly alien. A shape, humanoid in basic form but profoundly wrong, clinging to the vertical surface and descending with impossible speed and precision. Every fiber of my training screamed, wildlife encounter. Do not run. Appear large. Make noise. Back away slowly. "I'm leaving." I called out, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I am returning to the rim. I want no trouble." The clicking stopped. The thing, whatever it was, froze on the rock face about 80 feet above me, a nightmare silhouette against the slightly lighter stone. Then it spoke. "Yat-e, Ranger." The voice was the same one from the song, but now layered, harmonized with itself, as if multiple throats were producing the same words in perfect unison. It echoed slightly in the amphitheater of rock. "You come to my home in the darkness, without permission, without gifts, without respect. Why?" My hand went to my radio again. Useless static. No backup was coming. I was alone, truly alone. "I'm searching for a missing man," I said, forcing professionalism into my tone. "Carl Jensen. He was last seen here yesterday. Have you seen him?" "The one who climbed my stone," the layered voice asked. "Yes. Is he with you?" The figure descended another 20 feet, coming into sharper focus in my trembling light. It was feminine in shape, but the proportions were all wrong. Limbs elongated and multi-jointed. Fingers that tapered to sharp, dark points. "He is being taught," the voice said, a note of terrible patience in it. "Humility, the price of trespass on holy earth. I need to bring him back. His family is worried. Please." "His family," the voice replied, "should have taught him better." It was undeniably a she now, descended to 40 feet. Her face entered the edge of my light. It was almost beautiful, with high cheekbones and full lips. But the eyes were all wrong. Too large, too dark, fully reflective like a canyon cat's. And when she smiled, I saw rows of too many needle-sharp teeth. "You rangers," she said, still descending. "Your badge grants you no authority here. I was here before your parks, before your government, before your people crossed the great water. This is Sayland, my land. And you," she stopped 20 feet above me, clinging effortlessly. "You enter the dark without asking, without respect, just like the climber. I should teach you, too." Every primal instinct I possessed screamed at me to turn and run, to flee blindly into the dark canyon. But a sliver of my training and a stubborn thread of responsibility for Carl held me rooted. "Please," I said, the word feeling desperately inadequate. "Let me take him home. I'll make sure no one ever bothers this place again. I'll work with Samuel with the tribal council. I'll enforce the protocols." She tilted her head, a gesture that was eerily bird-like, considering. Then, in a motion so smooth it seemed to defy physics, she descended the final 20 feet, landing on the sand before me without a sound. Up close, she was terrifying and magnificent in equal measure. She stood a full 8 feet tall, her limbs bent in places human limbs should not, giving her a poised, predatory stance. Her skin was the color of the canyon at sunset, a deep, burnished red, and across it swirled patterns that looked less like tattoos and more like living petroglyphs, shifting subtly like sand in a breeze. Her hair was long black and seemed to move with a life of its own, unaffected by the still air. This was not a monster from a fable. This was Spider Grandmother, a being of power, presence, and ancient purpose. And I had blundered into her sanctuary. "The climber learns," she said, her face now inches from mine. I could smell a scent like dry sage and ozone. "He will return when the lesson is complete. Tomorrow, next moon, next season. Time moves differently in the sacred spaces. It is not yours to measure." One of her elongated fingers reached out and touched the center of my chest, right over my heart. A pain bloomed instantly, but it wasn't physical. It was deeper, a cold ache in my very sense of self. "But you, Ranger, you were warned. You think your help is welcome? Your help is arrogance. You walk on Say land as if you own it. You see holiness and think photo opportunity. You hear our warnings and dismiss them as superstition." Her finger pressed harder, and the cold ache spread. "You will learn, like the climber. You will learn what it means to show respect." She released my chest, but the chilling emptiness remained. Before I could speak, her hand shot out and gripped my forearm. The strength was impossible, immovable, like being caught in stone. She began pulling me toward the base of Weaver Rock. I fought, planting my feet, pulling back with all my strength. It was like try hold back a landslide. "Wait! I'm sorry. I didn't understand." I gasped. "Sorry," she said, not even straining, "is what follows disrespect. Sorry is too late." She placed my right palm flat against the warm sandstone of the spire. The rock was not cool as I expected. It was warm, almost hot to the touch, and I could feel a distinct, slow pulse through it. Thump, 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 like a gigantic, sleeping heart. "You wish to search?" Spider Grandmother whispered, her layered voice now intimate, deadly. "Then search. Climb my rock. Find the one you seek. Learn his lesson. I can't climb this." I pleaded, desperation clawing at my throat. "I don't have a rope, no gear. It's suicide." "Then you cannot help him," she said simply. "And if you cannot help, why are you here?" She released my arm and took a step back, her dark, reflective eyes fixed on me. I tried to pull my hand away from the rock. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged. I pulled harder. Instead of my hand coming free, it began to sink. The solid sandstone beneath my palm had become soft, yielding like dense clay. My fingers disappeared into the stone up to the knuckles. No. Stop. I screamed, pulling with my whole body. My wrist sank in, then my forearm. The rock was actively swallowing me, pulling me in. It was warm and gritty and horrifyingly alive. The sacred does not yield to please, Spider Grandmother observed, her voice calm, only to respect, to understanding. When you understand, the stone will release you. She watched as my elbow, then my bicep was consumed. Until then, she smiled her terrible, multi-toothed smile. Welcome to my home, Ranger. My shoulder was pulled in, then my chest. The sandstone pressed in on me from all sides, warm and suffocating. I tried to scream, but the grit filled my mouth, tasting of minerals and age. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The last thing I saw before complete darkness consumed my vision was her face. Patient, ancient, and utterly without mercy. Then there was only the red, grainy pressure, the taste of stone, the overwhelming thump of the canyon's heartbeat, and the sound of my own silenced terror. I don't know how long I was unconscious. Time had no meaning. I awoke inside the rock. That is the only way to describe it. I was not in a cave or crevasse. I was encased. Warm, granular sandstone pressed against every inch of my body, my back, my legs, my face. It should have been instantly fatal, yet somehow, impossibly, I could breathe. Thin tendrils of air seemed to permeate the stone itself. I could move, but only with immense, exhausting effort, like trying to swim upward through wet concrete. Panic threatened to shatter my mind. Don't panic. Assess. Adapt. Act. My ranger training surfaced through the terror. Trap situations. Conserve energy. Find a direction. I could breathe. I could move. Therefore, I could find a way out. I began to swim. I pushed against the dense, gritty medium with my arms. Kicked with my legs. It was agonizingly slow. For every inch I gained, my muscles burned with fatigue. I had no sense of direction, only the instinct to go up. I had to reach the surface. The process was a nightmare of slow motion struggle. Minutes or hours bled together in the absolute dark, marked only by the burning in my lungs and the relentless heartbeat of the stone. Just as I felt my strength about to give out, the resistance changed. The sandstone directly in front of my face became less dense, more porous. With a final, desperate push, my head broke through into open air. I gasped, dragging in huge, ragged lungfuls of cold, sweet canyon air. I was weeping and didn't know it. My vision was blurred with stone dust, but I could see stars above. I was lodged in a narrow, vertical crack on the face of Weaver Rock, about 60 feet above the canyon floor. My gear was gone. My headlamp, my radio, my pack, all absorbed or discarded by the living stone. All I had were my torn uniform and my battered body. And a dawning, horrifying comprehension. Spider Grandmother hadn't killed me. She was, as she'd said, teaching me. And the first lesson was utter, absolute helplessness. The climb was the next part of the curriculum. I looked down at the distant, shadowy floor, then up at the over 700 feet of spire above me. The message was clear. I had wanted to search, to find Carl, then I had to climb. With no gear in the dark, with torn and bleeding hands. I had no choice. Staying here meant dying of exposure, or falling when exhaustion won. Okay, I croaked to the uncaring rock. You want me to climb? I'll climb. There was no response but the wind. I began. The first 100 feet were pure torture. The crack provided just enough purchase to chimney up, using my back against one side and my feet against the other. The rough sandstone shredded my hands and my back through my shirt. I moved by braille and desperation, testing every hold with my weight. I was breaking every single rule of safe climbing. Never climb alone, never climb at night, never climb without protection. But the standard rules didn't account for being vomited out of sentient sandstone by a deity. Around 120 feet up, I found a small alcove, a scar in the rock face, just deep enough to squeeze into and rest. As I slumped inside, panting, my light-starred eyes began to adjust, and I saw them. Handprints, dozens of them, covering the alcove walls. Some were ancient, painted in faded red and white ochre, the signatures of the ancestral Puebloans. But among them were newer prints, their pigment still slightly vibrant, tacky to the touch. One set looked very recent. Carl's? Or others? How many people had Spider Grandmother brought here to teach? In a small crevice at the back of the alcove was a bundle wrapped in faded deer hide. I carefully unwrapped it. Inside were offerings, polished turquoise stones, a tiny pouch of corn pollen, delicate eagle feathers, small wooden figures carved into the shapes of animals. Offerings left over decades, perhaps centuries, by the Tse for Spider Grandmother. Samuel's words echoed in my memory with new, painful clarity. We searched tomorrow afternoon with proper offerings and prayers. I had come with nothing but arrogance. A deep, shameful understanding washed over me, colder than the night air. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not to the alcove, but to the spirit of the place, to the generations of hands that had left these prints. I should have listened. I should have respected you. Hesitantly, I took a small pinch of the corn pollen from the ancient pouch. I wasn't sure if borrowing an offering was another transgression, but my intent was all I had. I scattered the fine yellow dust at the entrance of the alcove, a gesture of penance. For a moment, the deep, rhythmic pulse I felt through the rock seemed to strengthen, to acknowledge the act. Then it faded back to its background state. I took it as permission to continue. The next several hundred feet of climbing were strangely less difficult. The route became more obvious, following a system of cracks and ledges that were almost stair-like in places. The rock itself seemed more cooperative, providing positive holds where I needed them. It wasn't easy. My body was screaming. My hands were raw, but it was possible in a way that free-soloing an 800-foot spire in the dark should not have been. I understood. Spider Grandmother was allowing me to climb. She was making the lesson attainable, but only as long as I was engaged in learning it. At roughly 300 feet, I hit a serious obstacle. The crack system I'd been following pinched out into nothing. To my left was a blank, featureless slab. To my right, a bulging overhang blocked my view of what, if anything, lay beyond. I was stuck, wedged in a narrowing chimney, with a sickening drop below me. The climbing adage screamed in my head, "Don't climb into a position you can't climb out of." I was already far past that point. My only option was to traverse around the overhang to the right, onto a face I couldn't see. I choked the dust from my torn hands, took 3 deep breaths to steady my hammering heart, and committed. The holds on the traverse were tiny, mere ripples in the sandstone. I moved with agonizing slowness, my fingers clinging to edges barely deep enough to grip, my toes smearing on minute crystals. Halfway across, the singing began again. The same woman's voice, layered and harmonious, drifting down from above the overhang. It was a lullaby I realized now, a gentle, teaching song in the Tse language, the kind a grandmother would sing while showing a child how to weave, how to live, how to belong to a place. The haunting beauty of it gave me a surge of strength. I pulled my body around the final edge of the overhang and found myself on a blessedly wide, flat ledge, about 4 feet deep. And I was not alone. Carl Jensen sat with his back against the rock wall, his knees drawn to his chest, his arms wrapped around them. He looked up as I hauled myself onto the ledge. His face was gaunt, dusty, and utterly empty. Not frightened, not relieved, just hollowed out. "Carl," I rasped, collapsing for a moment to catch my breath. Carl Jensen. I'm Ranger Eli Vance. I'm here to bring you back. He blinked slowly, as if processing a distant signal. You can't, he said, his voice flat and drained of all emotion. Yes, I can, I insisted, pushing myself up. We'll rope up, My words died. We had no rope, no gear, nothing. We'll descend together. Carefully, we'll figure out. You don't understand, he said, his gaze drifting past me to the void of the canyon. She's teaching us. We can't leave until we learn. Learn what? Respect. He let out a short, hollow sound that might have been a laugh. I climbed her rock, treated it like a gym wall, like a personal challenge. Wanted photos from the top to prove I'd conquered it. He spat the word, conquered, like you can conquer the sacred, like you can conquer something that's been here for 50 million years. That means more to say than my entire life ever could. He finally met my eyes. She pulled me into the stone, just like she did to you, made me swim up through it, made me understand what it's like to be inside something ancient, powerful, and completely indifferent to whether I live or die. How long have you been here? I asked, sitting down beside him. I don't know, he whispered. 3 days? Or 3 minutes? Time doesn't work right inside the sacred. She says she'll let us out when we learn, when we truly understand. I looked around the ledge properly. More offerings, carefully stacked cairns of stones, bundles of sage and cedar, intricately woven prayer items, and more handprints, a gallery of the taut stretching back, who knows how long. How many people has she brought here? All the disrespectful ones, Carl said softly. The ones who treat this place like it exists for them. For their Instagram, their adrenaline, their story. Most of them learn, eventually, and she lets them go. They climb down, they leave the canyon, and they spend the rest of their lives remembering what it felt like to be powerless, to understand how small they really are. He pointed a trembling finger upward, along the line of the spire. And the ones who don't learn. I followed his gesture. My breath caught in my throat. Higher on the rock face, maybe 100 feet above us, dark shapes were embedded in the sandstone. At first, I thought they were unusual rock formations. But as my eyes adjusted, the horror unveiled itself. They were people, dozens of them. Their bodies were partially merged with the stone, some just a face and a shoulder emerging from the cliff, others caught in a moment of frantic struggle, their forms weathered smooth by centuries of wind. Some looked recent, their clothing faintly recognizable as modern. Others were ancient, mere silhouettes of humanity, a permanent gallery of the defiant. The ones who wouldn't learn, Carl said, his voice barely audible. The ones who climbed with pure arrogance and never understood why that was wrong. She leaves them there, as warnings, as decorations, as examples. Before I could respond, a shadow fell across the ledge. Spider grandmother descended from above, settling gracefully before us. The ranger climbs adequately, her harmonized voice stated. But climbing is not learning. What do you wish to learn? I found my voice. What must all rangers learn? What all visitors must. She stepped closer, one long, pointed finger tracing the embroidered patch on my shoulder, the National Park Service arrowhead. This symbol, you believe it gives you authority to protect these places. From whom? From those who would harm them, I said. From tourists who leave trash. From developers who would build. But who? She interrupted, her voice sharpening. Protects sacred ground from you, from rangers who think rules written in distant cities matter more than wisdom born here, from governments that drew lines on a map and said, "This is ours now? We have an agreement." I argued weakly. Co-stewardship. We work with the Tse nation. Permission, she corrected, leaning in. Not ownership. Never ownership. The Tse owned this land before your government breathed its first breath. We allowed you to help care for it. Allowed. But you... Her finger pressed against my chest again, and the cold ache returned. You came in darkness without that permission, without respect, as if our agreement meant you could do as you please on your own schedule. I was trying to save him. Your job, she said, pulling back, is what the Tse say it is. Your authority is what we grant you. On this land, we are first. Always. She studied me, her head tilted. But you're starting to understand. I can feel it. The seed of humility. The beginning of genuine respect. A flicker of hope ignited in me. Then let us go. Please, let us climb down. She stood to her full, imposing height. Words are easy, Ranger. Understanding is deep. Climb higher. Both of you. To the summit stone. Place your hands upon it. When you touch it with true respect, not as a performance, not as a pretense, but with genuine understanding of your trespass, then you may descend. I looked at Carl, then back at her. And if we don't understand? Spider Grandmother's smile was a slow, terrifying reveal of needle teeth. Then you join the others, forever part of the sacred stone, forever watching, forever learning. With that, she turned and scuttled up the vertical face, disappearing into the gloom above. Carl and I were left in a silence broken only by the wind. We had no choice. The final climb to the summit, over 500 more feet of exposed rock, lay ahead. In our exhausted, battered state, it was a death sentence, but the alternative was a fate worse than death, frozen in stone for eternity. We began to climb as the first faint hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. The climb to the summit was a blur of pain, fear, and surreal clarity. As the sky lightened from black to deep blue, then to a wash of orange and pink, the immense scale of the canyon revealed itself around us. From our dizzying height, I could see for miles the serpentine path of the river, the clusters of ancient ruins like swallow nests on the cliffs, the vast, timeless silence of the desert. It was breathtakingly beautiful and humbling beyond words. I finally understood in my bones what Samuel had tried to tell me. This wasn't a park. It was a homeland, a living, sacred landscape, and I was an uninvited guest who had barged in after hours. Carl moved slowly in front of me, each movement deliberate. Around the 400-foot mark, he froze. He pressed himself against the rock, trembling violently. I can't, he whispered, his voice cracking. I can't keep going. My hands are gone. I'm going to fall. I climbed up beside him, finding a tiny foothold. Look at me, Carl. Not down. At me. He turned his head, his eyes wide with animal terror. You've already climbed 700 feet. You've done the impossible. Another 100 doesn't change anything but the view. I'm going to fall, he repeated, a mantra of despair. You're not going to fall. You're solid. Listen to me, I said, my own voice calmer than I felt. This isn't just climbing anymore. It's the lesson, and part of the lesson is this. I gestured to the vast landscape unfurling below us. This is what the Tse have known for 1,000 generations. This land is powerful. It demands respect, not because of a rule in a handbook, but because it can erase you. It's older than you, bigger than you, and it will be here, unchanged, long after we're dust. We weren't conquering anything. We were trespassing on something ancient and aware, and it noticed. I placed my bloody palm flat on the rock between us. Feel that? The pulse in the stone. Carl, after a moment's hesitation, slowly pressed his own hand against the sandstone. His expression shifted, the panic momentarily displaced by wonder. I feel it, he breathed. That's Weaver Rock. That's the sacred. That's what your guide tried to warn you about. What Samuel tried to warn me about. This place is alive in a way we're not equipped to understand. Climbing it without permission, without respect, without even acknowledging that life, we weren't adventurers. We were vandals. Carl kept his hand on the stone, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on his cheeks. I was so proud of myself, he whispered, for those first 50 feet, for the photos I never got to take. I know, I said. I came here at night because I thought I knew better than the people whose land this is. I thought my efficiency mattered more than their wisdom. Turns out, being a good ranger means listening to those people. Carl looked up at the remaining climb, now illuminated by the rising sun. The summit cap, a smooth, pale dome, was visible. I think I can keep going, he said, a new resolve in his voice. Not to conquer, to finish what I started, to understand. The final ascent then let's climb. By all rights, I said, impossible. The summit cap was a technical climbing problem, but as we committed to it, the rock assisted us. Holds appeared where the surface looked blank. Friction increased mysteriously. Spider Grandmother was guiding us to the finish line, making the final test passable for those who had begun to learn. The last 10 feet was a narrow chimney. I wedged myself inside and inched upward, every muscle shrieking, and finally pulled my body over the edge onto the summit of Weaver Rock. The top was a flat, white-stained circle about 15 feet across, scattered with the evidence of centuries of reverence. Stone cairns, faded prayer flags tied to rocks, offerings of shells, feathers, and bundles wrapped in cloth. In the very center sat a single dark, water-smoothed stone about the size of a loaf of bread, its surface polished to a shine by countless touches. We knelt before it, exhausted, awestruck. With true respect, I whispered the words of prayer. I reached out slowly. My palm met the cool, smooth surface. The moment of contact was electric. The steady pulse I'd felt throughout the climb erupted into a thunderous, rhythmic drumming that vibrated through my entire being. Understanding didn't come in words or thoughts, but in a flood of sensory memory, visions, feelings, knowing. I saw millennia unfold. Ancient peoples hunting, farming, building in harmony with the canyon's rhythms. I saw the arrival of Tse, their deep spiritual bond with the land forming, their stories becoming the landscape stories. I saw generations leaving offerings, singing prayers, their respect a constant thread through time. And I saw the others, the ones like Carl and me, arriving with conquest in their hearts. I saw their arrogance, their disregard, and I saw their fates. The ones who learned, walking away changed, and the ones who refused, becoming permanent, silent warnings in the stone. I saw Spider Grandmother not as a monster, but as a guardian, a teacher, a necessary force of consequence for a sacred space. And finally, I saw my own arrogance with devastating clarity. My uniform was not a shield of authority here. It was a costume. My federal rules were scribbles on paper next to the deep, living law of this place. I had forgotten I was a guest. I had forgotten to ask permission. I had forgotten to listen. I pulled my hand back, gasping. Carl was openly weeping, his forehead pressed against the summit stone. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. You're not a thing. You're sacred. I should have known." A shadow fell over us. Spider Grandmother stood at the edge of the summit, silhouetted by the blinding morning sun. "You have learned," she said, her voice now singular, clear, and somehow gentler. "The beginning of respect, the beginning of understanding. You may descend. The rock will allow you." She knelt, bringing her unsettling, beautiful face level with ours. "But remember this lesson. Remember what you felt. Remember what you understood." "I will," I vowed. Carl nodded frantically. "I'll never forget. I'll tell everyone." Spider Grandmother shook her head. "No, Do not tell everyone. They would not believe. They would think you mad, think you damaged by sun and thirst. She stood. Tell only those who need to hear it. Tell those who come here thinking they can conquer. Tell those who ignore tribal warnings. Tell those who need to learn, before the canyon must teach them itself. She pointed to the northern side of the summit. There is a steep spring on the descent path. At its base, you will find water and food, enough to reach the rim. Descend carefully. The rock will be kind to you now, but it can still kill those who are careless. Thank you, I said, emotion choking my voice, for teaching us, for not making us like the others. Her expression was solemn, inscrutable. I do not enjoy creating the stone-bound. They are failure, proof that some refuse to learn, even when shown the truth. You, she said, looking at both of us, were teachable. That is why you live. With a final nod, she stepped backwards off the summit's edge and was gone. We found the spring, drank deeply from the cool, hidden water, and ate the pemmican and dried fruit left there in a waterproof pouch. The descent was long, but the rock was indeed forgiving. Holds were plentiful. Ledges appeared at just the right times. We reached the canyon floor at midday, staggering into the bright sunlight. Samuel, Leo, and 2 other Tse men were waiting there, a small camp set up with medical supplies and water. Samuel looked at me for a long, silent minute, taking in my torn uniform, my bloody hands, my utterly changed demeanor. You went at night, he said finally, without offerings. I did, I admitted, my voice rough. And you returned, he observed, a statement heavy with meaning. That means you learned something. I learned I should have listened to you. I said, the words heartfelt. I learned this is my land. It never was. I learned what respect truly means. Not just following a rule, but understanding why the rule exists. Samuel's stern face softened into the faintest of smiles. Good. That is good. Many rangers must learn this lesson. Most learn it the hard way. He gestured to a first aid kit. Let Leo tend to your hands. Then we go back to the rim. As Leo cleaned and bandaged my wounds, Samuel leaned close. And Eli, you will write your report very carefully. You will say you found Carl Jensen at the base of Weaver Rock, dehydrated and disoriented from exposure. You provided first aid and call for assistance. You will say nothing about climbing, nothing about the summit, nothing about her. I met his knowing gaze. I understand. His smile widened a fraction. Some truths are not for official reports. They are for the heart to keep. My official report was exactly that. Brief, clean, plausible. The real story, every terrifying and sacred detail, I wrote down in a private journal that I keep locked away. I needed a record, proof to myself that it was real. I stayed at Canyon Serenity for 2 more years. In that time, I became a student. I learned from, say, elders about land stewardship, about the stories woven into geography, about the plants used for medicine and ceremony. I learned that being a ranger here meant being a bridge, not a barrier, and that required humility. I never went to Weaver Rock at night again. I never forgot the pulse of the stone or the eyes of Spider Grandmother. Before I transferred out to help develop tribal co-management programs for other parks, I visited the spire one last time in daylight, with Samuel's blessing. I left my own offerings, corn pollen, a piece of turquoise, tobacco tied in red cloth, at its base. Thank you, I said to the wind and the rock, for teaching me. The wind picked up, smelling of sage, and for just an instant, I saw a tall, dark figure standing at the summit. She raised a long-fingered hand. Then, just rock and endless sky. I left that canyon a different man. Some rangers learn from manuals and seminars. I learned from an 800-foot climb in the dark, with Tse Guardian as my professor and Sacred Stone as my classroom. The lesson is engraved on my soul. We do not own these wild, holy places. We are guests, and our survival, physical and spiritual, depends on remembering that, on listening to those who were here first, and on approaching with genuine respect. This account was submitted to the Park Service's internal tribal co-management training program in 2027. Ranger Eli Vance now works as a national liaison between the NPS and various tribal nations. When asked about his dramatic shift in perspective, he only says, "I had a good teacher. She showed me that some places demand genuine humility and a willingness to learn from those who were here first." He offers no other details. Those who worked with him at Canyon Serenity know better than to press. They know he spent a night at Weaver Rock. They know he came back changed. And they know that some lessons are too sacred to share with those who haven't earned the right to hear them. The Tsay guides have a saying now. They say Spider Grandmother is pleased with the new generation of rangers. They say she watches a little less vigilantly because more people understand. But on clear nights when the moon is full, hikers still sometimes report hearing a woman's voice, layered in harmony, singing from the summit. The guides hear these reports and simply smile. "Yaddy," they say, "that is Spider Grandmother. She is teaching. She is protecting." And they remind every visitor, kindly but firmly, that Weaver Rock is sacred. It demands respect. It expects proper protocol. And those who ignore this might just receive an education they'll never forget. If you want more stories from the boundary between the world we know and the deeper truths that lie just beyond it, stories that challenge what we think is possible, then you need to be part of this community. Your engagement is what allows us to find and share these accounts. So, if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel something, please show your support. Like this video right now. That simple click tells the algorithm that this content matters, that stories with depth and respect deserve to be seen. And more importantly, subscribe to Winds of Thought. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a journey into the unknown. We have so many more stories like this one. True accounts, unexplained phenomena, and profound lessons from the edges of the map waiting for you. By subscribing, you're not just watching videos. You're joining an expedition. Now, I want to hear from you. This is crucial. In the comments below, tell me, have you ever been somewhere that felt truly alive? A forest, a mountain, a stretch of desert where the silence felt like a presence, where you felt not like a visitor, but like you were being observed, assessed, or even welcomed by the land itself. Share your experience. Let's create a record of these places. Because maybe, just maybe, by sharing these feelings, we can remind each other to listen a little closer, to tread a little lighter, and to remember that we are, and always will be, guests in a very old, very wise world. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of Winds of Thought.